Today we'll be talking about Godblight, the Warhammer 40k book. And here's an interesting thing. What I'm doing right now is reading a Reddit thread by user, let me just see, Astrid D. I'll have his thread posted in the description, yeah, of course. Give him a follow, subscribe, or whatever Reddit has. So, let's begin. Now, Godblight is sent before Guilliman crossed into the Imperium Nihilus, so technically before the devastation of Baal, with Tetrarch Felix acting as a proxy for the reader. Now, the book opens just before the assault on the planet Yax, and there's Guilliman that interrogates a demon of sorts, presumably some former Radical Inquisitor's retinue from that point, to better get a grasp on Mortarion's plan. Now, unfortunately, the demon kind of breaks out of their little summoning circle, but don't worry, Guilliman's there with the Emperor's sword to smite it to the ground. This whole event makes the Grey Knights there, because of course there were Grey Knights there to help with this demon, a very not happy. They're not happy with what they saw, and they decide to leave the army for some time, and thus they play no part in the following battle that will ensue in the book. Yeah, this was made to, not have the overpowered Space Marines be in there in the main plot of the book, but, whatever. Now, we're gonna move to the Cauldron of Nurgle, and Mortarion is in an interesting spot. You see, Chaos likes to fight among themselves. They don't really care. Slanesh, Nurgle, Tzeentch, Kron, it doesn't matter. They just keep fighting each other. And Mortarion is in a bad spot. You see, Mortarion now waits for Guilliman to come at him, but Tzeentch and Kron decide it's a good idea to team up and try to conquer the domain of Nurgle. That's not gonna end well for Mortarion down the road, as you might expect. Now, Mortarion's former second-in-command, or first-in-command, whatever you want to say, Typhus just leaves his army to attend a Nurgle invasion in another part of the world. But Typhus warns his Primarch that Nurgle isn't really that pleased with Mortarion's feud with Guilliman, and, well, he should do better to respect the will of the Chaos God. Of course, Mortarion isn't having any of it and decides to do his thing no matter what. Now we're gonna cut a little and go back to Guilliman, of course. This time in a beautiful table in Guilliman's nice room. And there, he invites Maxime, a librarian from, the Ultramarines, of course. What were you expecting? And Ilya Nastasi. For those more veterans into this hobby, you might know that Ilya Nastasi is the half Eldar, half human, from the original Rogue Trader, if I'm not mistaken. Also based on the Romanian tennis player, so yeah. Points there, I guess. But in this story that really canonizes him, he's an Eldar ambassador to Guilliman. And they have a pretty nice talk about godhood and whether the Emperor is a god. Guilliman also reveals to Maxime and Ilyan that Lorgar's the originator of the Imperial Cult. That the Imperial Cult exists because Lorgar wrote it and made the god Emperor, well, a god in himself. And as you might expected, Maxim is disturbed by this news, while Ilyan proves once again why Eldars deserve everything they've got until now and will get in the future by smiling smugly. But the Eldar have a little theory about it. They can't reach a conclusion on what the Emperor really is at this point, and their Farseers aren't able to look directly into the Astronomicon to get a grasp of it. So while Maxime is disturbed, Anastasia just knows he doesn't have any clue what's wrong with the Emperor or what he is. But it's disturbing when you think about it, especially from the Eldar's point. Now, two trains of thoughts are considered during this discussion. Even if the Emperor was originally a man, the fate of so many people over the past 10,000 years might have changed his nature. And with people starting to, believe in Guilliman himself, is he some sort of demigod? The son of a god? Maybe the miracles we're seeing in the last books might not be the Emperor's, but manifestation of people's faith in Guilliman? I mean, it's a really complex discussion when you go into the book, and it touches on these subjects because it's about time we learn something about that. But, Ilia Anastasia being an Eldar, of course, his usefulness is limited. Now, we also find out at this point that the Elsar indicates there are elder gods, more terrible than even the Necron's Catan, if that is possible. Moving forward now, we'll go to Rotigus, the Rainfather, and Kugat. Now, these two are some big, chunky plague boys. They are great unclean ones. Pretty big and strong. And they have this nice preclusion for liking, as all Nurgle things, diseases and other such nasty stuff. Now, they are competing for Nurgle's favor, and Kugat decided that the best way to do that is to perfect the Godblight. The ultimate disease that can kill a Primarch for good. And greater demons as well, but firstly we'll test it on the Primarch. But of course, Rotigus comes in and helps make the plague better in the Cauldron. And he also hints subtly that he has a more Zechian approach to corruption. But he does take a bath in Kugat's boiling cauldron where he makes the Godblight and spits in it. So, I mean, they're great and clean ones. Nothing really good will happen out of it, Oh, they do seem comical at some point, I'll give you that. Now we're gonna move to close to Yax. And we're gonna have some boarding action with Guilliman, Tribune Colocon, I think that's how you pronounce it, and the Custodes. Cato Sicarius, unfortunately, is more relegated to a background character in this book, but not by his own fault. When you got the Primarch and the Custodes, it's kinda hard to be that important when you're a Space Marine. It's like being an Imperial Guard in a Space Marine meeting. But let's move on from that subject right now, and go back to this. Colocon has warmed up more to Guilliman, but a little bit. Now, once Guilliman landed on Lax, Kugat had a little bit of an interesting plan in the book. He summoned a Tattle Slug. Now, what a Tattle Slug is, it's a tiny little disgusting creature that lives off information. It's a knowledge trader, an information trader. Call it whatever you like. But he's good at his job, and Kugat wanted to use him to, find out more about Guilliman's plan and strategies. And he's done that by making a deal with the Tattle Slug, and the Tattle Slug decided to infiltrate an Imperial officer that was going to be present at Guilliman's strategy briefing. We're going to jump over the disgusting way the Tattle Slug infects the Imperial officer because, it's better that way. On another part of the world, the priest Matthias is back in action. Actually, He was the first one on the ground. Once they landed on Yax, he was the first to take action, and well, apparently since the last book, he's gained quite a big following. Got some Cadians, got some Sisters of Battles, got some tanks. He is depicted going into battle against Nurgle's army with no kind of protection and suffering no illnesses or ill effects. This man is on a crusading fever, going to destroy the forces of chaos. He's almost mad with faith, but also he's shown to be merciful. But you know, the book likes to play with the idea of, oh, he's corrupted, he's not corrupted, he's corrupted, he's not corrupted. Guilliman observed Matthew giving sermons, and well, Matthew basically calling him a demigod. But you know, Cauldron wants to end this madness right there and there. But Guilliman, well, he's not really that convinced about stuff, you know. So he basically lets Matthew do his thing. But of course, they get in a little bit of a disagreement, and Matthew also threatened Guilliman by saying if he is killed, the church will believe that perhaps Guilliman wants to take the throne after all. And that will spark a civil war, as you can imagine. All the priest wants is for Guilliman to see the light and believe his father's a god. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Now we're gonna move to Fabian. And he's on Macrog, whatever. And Macrog is right now under siege by Nurgle. Now, the enemy's army isn't that big, but it is tying down the, forces at home from aiding Guilliman and, well, his Yax campaign. Now, Fabian is a curious type, and he wants to enter the library of Ptolemy. But he's not let because Guilliman put a ban on anybody ever entering that library. Funny enough, at some point it starts to rain. Green rain. Nice. Going back to Guilliman, his plan is, I kid you not, to fortify the capital and goad Mortarion into attacking him. At this point, I think Guilliman forgot he's the Primarch of the Ultramarines, not the Imperial Fist, and his name is Roboute Guilliman, not Dorn. But maybe he learned a thing or two from his brothers. At the same time, the Imperium is trying to locate and destroy Kugat's Cauldron, which, guess what, was also on Yax. But here's the problem. Yax is almost entirely corrupted. A big chunk of it is now part of the warp, and thus orbital sensors can't really find the Cauldron. And, of course, orbital bombardment becomes harder when you don't know what you're hitting at. So, the Imperium is forced to search for the Cauldron on foot. That's gonna be nice. Now, Guilliman sees Matthew's crusade leaving the city because they supposedly had a vision from the Emperor. An Ultramarine, a higher up one, wanted to stop the crusade, but Guilliman let them go. Maybe in a test to see if the priest's beliefs were true, maybe to just get rid of him in some way. Oh well. Ironically, Matthew isn't the only force out in Yax at this point. Now, infantry unit of Primarchs, of course they're Primarchs, also dropped on Yax to start searching for the Cauldron. And there's this gray shield from like a previous book called Justinian, who's now integrated with the Nova Marines. Good for him. Not really sure if it's a promotion, but sure. At some point, they reach the capital, and they assault it. And their Felix is starting to beat back demon engines and death guards. Guilliman joins in, well, at the end, of course, as any good leader does, right? And marches forces outside the city to face Mortarion. During the same time, Matthew's crusade is guided by this vision and arrives at the Cauldron's location. You have to understand though that they've been fighting a lot of death guards and demons, so their force isn't as big as when they left the city. And once they started their first fight for the Cauldron, it went bad. Very bad. Horrible for the Crusaders. But guess who arrived just in time to save them? The Primarchs task force. Yeah, Primarchs. Once more. I could make my hatred for Primarchs more known, but you know, what's the point in that? But anyway, the Primarchs come and manages to save enough of the Cadians and the Sisters of Battle, so at the end they can make one final push towards Kugat and his damned cauldron. Back in the capital, Mortarion comes and he starts to fight Guilliman. Now, the Imperium used a big and powerful expensive orbital ordnance to blast a big crater in Mortarion's army. And well, Guilliman then decided to just wade right in and started calling his brother to show up. Now, Guilliman is kind of how should I say it? A dick in this one, because he starts goading Mortarion because he knows that's the only way that it works against him, because Mortarion likes monologues apparently, and he also enjoys playing the victim. Guilliman also notices that Perturabo would have killed him directly with artillery bombardment, and how other ways his brothers would have killed him, but you know, irrelevant at this point. At the same spot, Ilian and the Librarians started a ritual as the fight began. Now, when you look into it, Guilliman is the more competent fighter, able to shoot Mortarion's gun right off his hand and match Silence's blow with the Emperor's sword. However, Mortarion's a demon prince. Mortarion can fly, and he has a bunch of sorcery powers. Honestly, there was no way for Guilliman to win. And at some point, Mortarion manages to kick down Guilliman, gloats over him, and injects him with a Godblight. Anything inside the ritual bubble dies. Guilliman's face is turned black, his skin is peeled off, and his armor starts to rust. And it's quite a little bit nice when you read the book. I recommend it. But we're gonna have to leave Guilliman's final moments there for a moment and go back to the Cauldron and the fight at the Cauldron. Kugat had to leave his Cauldron, and he decided to duel a Primarchs lieutenant, of all people, but okay. While Matthew is rescued by jump-pack Primarchs from his rotting war train. Again, he is curiously unharmed, even though everything around him was corrupted by Nurgle's influence. He told the Primarchs who rescued him that he has to reach the Cauldron. We're circling back to Guilliman's untimely demise a little bit. As Guilliman dies, his soul starts phasing into Nurgle's garden. He reminisced about the meeting he had with the Emperor when he returned to life. And the way they go into this is a little bit interesting because it seems they're going into the fragmented being as an Emperor. Because the Emperor alternated between calling Guilliman my son, 13, savior, hope, thief, liar, among many other things. And somehow Mortarion gets to see this, and he's a little bit scared of it. Rightfully so. Guilliman still can't really recall the full conversation between him and the Emperor, even though it's been days since he emerged from the throne room. On the other hand, Trajan, the chief custodian, insisted he saw and hear nothing but light, and Guilliman saying something in a serene manner. which is very different from Guilliman's own recollection of falling to the ground and begging his father. Interesting family dynamic there. At the Cauldron again. We're going back to the Cauldron again. And it's reaching its climax. Kugat managed to kill the Primarchs lieutenant, of course. I would have been surprised if he didn't. But he took some wounds in the process. Matthew was escorted by some Primarchs, or the rest of them, close to the Cauldron. And there's something strange happening with him. Like his presence turned away demons, and even Kugat's plague vomit became fresh water around him. That's a little bit strange. The greater demon moved in to get physical, but got speared back to Nurgle's garden by the Cadian commander's last remaining Lemon Rus. Never doubt those tanks. Very useful. Matthew made a prayer to the Emperor and he touched the Cauldron. A vision of a giant golden figure with flaming sword struck the Cauldron, causing an explosion of light, killing all demons around the Cauldron, and, funnily enough, turning the Primarchs into ragdolls. I like that. Moving to outside of Yax now, in orbit, Kolokon is informed that Nurgle's influence is waning across the planet, and they finally get the teleport lock. Yay! The Custodes prepared for a strike right into the heart of Mortarion's army. Well, the original plan was, to assist in destroying the Cauldron, but Kugat created a storm that jammed all teleportation and a chunk of the planet's in the warp. So, you can imagine. Now, remember, Guilliman is dead. He's dying, and he found himself, the Guilliman spirit and Mortarion, found themselves in the Garden of Nurgle. Strange. Mortarion felt the Cauldron's destruction, and suddenly a terrible presence, and as Mortarion regards it as powerful as Nurgle, moved through the warp and through Guilliman. He tried to strike at Guilliman's body, but found that he couldn't move. Guilliman's dead body came back to life, blood vessels regenerated, the armor of fate takes a new sheen, and Guilliman floated up in a pillar of light. I ain't that holy. Something is speaking with Guilliman's voice, but it's not quite the avenging sun. And here's why. The voice called Mortarion a traitor who destroyed everything that could have been. More interestingly, the voice said that one day Mortarion might be saved, but now he has to go back to the monster he chose. Suddenly, a small door appears in the garden, and Mortarion gets pulled back to face the judgment of Nurgle. I don't think it's like in those cartoons where a giant cartoon hand just comes out of a tiny door, grabs something, and takes him in. Like Ed, Edd n Eddy style. I think that works. Guilliman spoke with wrath. Whatever possessed him made him lift its sword, and a corridor of flame opened between himself and the mansion. The thing possessing Guilliman said that the opening of the rift has destroyed the balance between the material and the warp. And the gods should know that even the realms of chaos isn't real anymore. Only will is real, and there is a will unmatched by others. Luckily, Guilliman wakes up from this nightmare on the battlefield of Yax. Mortarion, of course, is nowhere to be found, and the last remaining dead guards are retreating, with the custodians having a great time shooting them from behind, because that's what you do to traitors. The Plague Wars are over. Yeah, the Plague Wars are over. That's nice. Let's go back to another side of this world. We cut back to the Custodes strike team sent to the Cauldron site. They found Justinian alive, the Nova Marine guy, along with Mathieu. But this time around, he got exposed to the Cauldron, and whatever protection wards or something he had on him didn't work anymore. Because he was now afflicted with 1,000,000 diseases. But he still was alive somehow. because he wanted to speak to Guilliman. Now we're gonna move to another part of this universe. I like how the book just jumps everywhere. We're gonna go to Macragge, whatever. While this was happening, Roticus decided to launch an attack on Macragge. At the beginning, it seemed pointless, ineffectual in a way, but it turns out that Roticus' plan was never to destroy Macragge. No, it was to trick Fabian into entering the library and tempt him with a book. A very special book, and one that I kinda like, that will show Fabian what a hypocrite Guilliman is. Of course, Fabian, being a devout follower of the God Emperor, initially refused. But then again, his, friend Tigurius showed up to battle the demon, because you can't really let the poor bloke fight the demon by himself, especially a demon prince. A great and clean one in this case. Now, Tigurius puts up a good fight, but ends up defeated. Before the demon can move in to kill him, guess what happens? You'll never guess. The Cauldron on Yax gets destroyed. And thus Nurgle's influence on Macragge and Yax, and their sector, wanes. So Roticus is forced to return to the warp, but not before trying to edge Fabian a little bit along with that book thing, Now, at this point, the library is destroyed. Most of the books are gone, except one. Fabian takes a look at the book, the only remaining book, and he was intrigued by the cover of it and the title of the book. Of course, he took it without Tigurius noticing. Now, you might be wondering, what's the book? Well, the book was entitled The Reign of Emperor Sanguinius. Imperium Secundus. We're getting to there. Nice. On Yax now, Guilliman has his last conversation with Matteo. Again, remember, the priest is infected with 1,000,000 diseases. So, his time on this, I want to say Earth, but his time in this world isn't that much longer. But the priest says that the Emperor is preserving him to have these last words with Guilliman. The Emperor is waking up. Yay! The opening of the rift and the psychic awakening has strengthened the faith of the Imperium's populace and have made the Emperor even stronger in the process. Guilliman is coming back in his plan, and not really sure if he's a peon or more of a knight or a rook or whatever. But Guilliman is part of the Emperor's plan, and while the Emperor himself is not ready to come back yet, it's up to Guilliman to make it happen. Have faith in the Emperor and all will be well. And with those words, the priest just dies. Surprising that he managed to live this long, but whatever. But this priest shows us something more interesting, that during these books, he really was led by the Emperor's vision. So, something's happening right there. Now, in the more normal parts of the world, well, still Guilliman, of course, Guilliman still believes the Emperor is definitely something. But he's not a god. Mario also kind of admitted in his last moments that maybe Guilliman wasn't built to believe in that way. The Emperor simply uses people. He's always been like that. Guilliman thinks not without a hint of bitterness. And he should know that's why we had the Horus Heresy. Remember? Anyway. The last conversation in the book is between Guilliman and Call Inferior about the Emperor's godhood. The Mechanicus noticed that Guilliman seems fearful about the idea of the Emperor working through him, and warns Guilliman to be careful about bringing the Emperor back to life, because what comes out of the throne room might not be the same exact thing that entered it. And Guilliman knows all too well, gods are blightful to all living things. Now this is all thanks to Astrid_D on Reddit. He made this summary possible. Again, as I said before, give him a like, subscribe, follow, or whatever Reddit has. Thanks for watching.